Okay, when you're ready, action.
Cinemas, magical buildings that allow us to immerse ourselves in countless curious worlds, to experience lives that we may never get the opportunity to live, or to help us understand our own lives just that little bit better. But for so many of us, the cinema is more than a building. It's a place that molds us, inspires us, and sometimes even changes us when we least expect. And we've missed them a lot. But now the cinema is back. So come with me now, as I, Perry J. O'Halloran, take you inside some of this country's greatest independent cinemas to explore their stories, their secrets, and more than just a few of our favourite things. Because if you think that you've missed the cinema, just wait till you see how much the cinema has missed you. Leafy East Finchley, my old neck of the woods for this movie house gem built in 1910 with more than a few famous patrons to its name. And just from the front, you can already see that there aren't many cinemas like the Phoenix.
So we're standing on the Phoenix balcony, which was introduced after our centenary restoration in 2010. I think it's definitely one of our customers' favourite features. Sitting on this balcony here, enjoying some drinks or some coffees from our cafe, maybe some snacks.
And what a beautiful welcome back to the cinema.
It's such a great old-fashioned tool to have one of these, to be able to advertise what you're showing, but also communicate with your audience. We've used the canopy as a way to communicate with the audience and send good messages and offer support. And it's a really sort of nice old-fashioned thing to have, because not many cinemas still have these readographs. We've had, I think, a proposal on there. We've had a few birthday messages. I mean, I think it's a cinema that is really close to people's hearts.
One thing I've noticed that this balcony does have, it's got its own cameraman. And I just feel a little bit weird about that, so should we go back inside?
Yeah.
Is he still looking at us?
Yeah, I think he is.
Now, if like me, you've always daydreamed of being a projectionist, you're really gonna love Nathan's story.
Well, I started out, like most people here, in front of house, and started sneaking up at here on Saturday nights to speak with the projectionist. And you start to get in here a little bit more, asking a few questions. And I was mostly intrigued about working with the 35mm. Eventually got a shift on a Saturday night, and things rolled from there, really.
Wow, so your life quite closely follows the plot of Cinema Paradiso.
I know, it's kind of freaky.
You are my hero. And actually, it's everything that I think I would want in a projection room. It's got artifacts on the wall. You've got a 35mm projector alongside a digital projector. Is there one that you're more well versed in than the other?
I think the digital, in a sense, once you get your head around it, it's a bit like a DVD player. It's pretty straightforward. The 35mm, though, on the other hand, is like running an old car. There is a chance that it will break down, and you need to know what to do. Every 35mm projector is slightly different as well. They all have little hacks that you need to know to keep it running.
I see.
Very unique.
So you basically know the ins and outs of this 35mm projector?
To a degree, you kind of have to. In case anything goes wrong, you need to jump on it pretty quickly.
And how old are we talking?
Well, this actually is what's considered a Rolls Royce of 35mm projectors.
Whoa.
It was the last model that this Italian company made, Cinemecanica. We picked it up in, I believe, 2011. There was other elements that were added to it as well. So it's a bit of a Frankenstein, but it's a fantastic projector. And any projectionists that come in here from other cinemas are always wowed that we've got one, and they haven't.
I hear that as great as digital projection is and all the amazing things that come with it, they can sometimes need a little bit more maintenance than the 35mm.
Yeah.
And I should probably also point out that that's what we can hear right now, isn't it?
That's correct. That's the server running, and that needs to run all the time. Keep it cool. It's a giant computer, so it needs to be kept cool. It's also live in effect because films are coming from all over the world and being downloaded onto it. So we can't turn it off because that film will not arrive.
Okay. So in comparison, what kind of a maintenance procedure does the 35mm take even now? Is it just kind of a quick tune-up?
It's an old car. You need to oil it. You need to check that the brakes are working as they should. They have rubber belts that can snap very easily with age. You need to check that the film is slotted into the gate correctly so it doesn't end up at the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, which can happen. If anyone's watched Cinema Paradiso, the things that go wrong in that film go wrong here as well.
Even to this day?
Even to this day. Things happen and you have to jump on it very quickly.
So it really does look as though digital and film is still continuing to work literally in this case, side by side.
I agree. And I think ultimately we need more film directors to push that their films are released on 35mm to be able to continue to do that. When bigger Hollywood just wants to shift to digital, I think that creates not a cinema industry that I would like to be a part of to a degree. I think that cinema needs to be kept as 35mm and continued because it still looks and sounds better.
Like any building that's over 100 years old, well, you have to ask, don't you?
There has been hauntings known.
No. Really?
We have had moments of conversations in here with spirits where we thought, we think you should leave now.
You've had conversations with spirits?
Not directly, but the projectionist that used to work here has said he's had conversations with something or another.
So what kind of things have...
If you're sat in the stool late at night and you're the only person in the building, it has been known to feel breath of fresh air on your neck. Well, I say fresh, cool air. You know, it's a normal functioning projection room. They are a dying breed, but it feels like a workshop, and that to me is how a projection room should be.
And when your projection room is as classic as the one at the Phoenix, it's safe to assume that your auditorium will be breathtaking.
So this is the screen inside the Phoenix Cinema, East Finchley.
Maybe I'm acting like this is my first rodeo, but a long time ago, in that middle aisle, I once fell in love under these warm, glowy lights. And when I think of how many nervous first dates and heads resting on shoulders that this room must have seen, I can't help but wonder how many more hearts must have had the same fate over the years.
It's just unbelievable. I feel like the longer I look, the more details I'm seeing. Can you tell me a little bit more about these beautiful gold panels?
Yeah, I mean, they're from the 1938 Art Deco restoration of the cinema by Mollo and Egan. When they were designed, they were meant to represent life, science, art, society, culture, in the way that I think cinema at that time was thought it could capture all of those things. So I think they were a really nice timepiece. And they sort of sit side by side with this barrel vaulted ceiling, so you can see the whole history of the cinema standing where we are.
Just looking at the ceiling, it looks like it goes further back than the screen that we're standing in itself.
The cinema used to be about twice the size it is now. It had about double the number of seats because most of the building was taken up by the screen. And in fact, it was the other way around. So the screen was at the front of the building, but there were lots of complaints about the noise. So yeah, in fact, it's a much smaller auditorium than it used to be. So if you go into the lobby areas, you can still see traces of the barrel vaulted ceiling out there as well. It's a very popular filming location. Phoenix has starred in quite a few famous feature films, and I think it looks a bit like a film set. It looks like, you know, what you would design for what a cinema used to look like, and the panels are such a beautiful, unique element. The red seating is also really important and complements it perfectly.
So what is it about cinemas like the Phoenix that make them mean so much to people?
I think it is that way that you can walk into this dark room and the light comes on and it transports you. But I think in terms of survival, the Phoenix teaches us you can learn about the history of cinema just by learning about the history of the Phoenix Cinema. It opened as one of the first cinemas in the country. It's kind of gone through every stage of problem, but also solution. So in the 30s, it had a major refurb and became an Art Deco cinema, as was the fashion. In the 70s, it was an art cinema. In the 80s, it was saved by its community. It's now adapting to the digital world, and it's a wonderful source for us to learn about how moving image on screen has a way of surviving. It's about knowing your audience. For us, it's mainly looking at what films are available and then looking at what we think will do well, but also looking at what we think might challenge our existing audience and bring in new audiences.
So it's not necessarily just about watching what people like and giving them more of that. It's also about getting a feel for what they enjoy watching, the kind of things that they like, and then maybe testing them out with some other things that they might not be aware of.
Definitely, because I think sometimes, I think if you want to, you can sort of get stuck with a certain kind of program where everyone brands you that you're the cinema that does this. And I think it's really important to keep evolving and to keep bringing in new audiences. And it's also important to challenge your existing audiences.
I remember wanting to see Cinema Paradiso so much. I saw that it was screening here and I couldn't get a ticket. It was a members screening. I just couldn't get a ticket. I was new to the area at the time, but I called up and just pleaded, can I please come and see it? And somebody here actually very kindly gave me a ticket to come and see it. And after seeing Cinema Paradiso, I just fell in love with Italian cinema. And I then came to watch Fellini films. I think there was a whole midnight Fellini season going on at the time. So I was getting the night bus back home early hours of the morning. And I don't think I would have done that unless I'd been given that chance to come in and see it along with everyone else.
I think it's really exciting when you get to a point where you think your audience trusts you enough to curate some interesting things. As a first-run cinema, we're often showing the main feature films that are out that week. But it's great when you have those spaces in the programme to curate interesting things and to know that your audience will trust you because you've got a good track record with them. I mean, I think there is something just about being in this big dark room and feeling and just sort of having this light in front of you and it transporting you somewhere different. To compare it to watching films at home, I think it's just a different thing. I mean, you go to galleries to look at paintings on the wall. There is a difference between looking at paintings in a book and going to a gallery. And in the same way, there's a difference between watching a film in the cinema and watching a film at home.
And what about those who need their local cinema?
There must be people also who really rely on going to the cinema, not even the overall experience, but just going to the cinema. That's part of their daily life and it's how they deal with the realities of life.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're a real community cinema in that sense because we have people that come with groups of friends who have, to have fun and it's a social experience. But we certainly also have people who perhaps are older and more isolated and they see this as a real sort of social community space that they can come to.
There are they're lovely little name tags on some of the seats. I'm guessing from people who loved it for parts of their lives and they have fond memories of being here. I definitely get the impression that the Phoenix is a cinema that's very closely connected to its community.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it is. It's been here. It's one of the oldest continuously operating cinemas in the UK. And we so often have people bringing their children, whereas the parents had come as children themselves. People really grow up with the Phoenix. It's really heartening when you meet people whose family histories are so deeply connected to the Phoenix. And I think those are the people who buy plaques to put on these seats because they want to leave a lasting memory there. I think there are people who come on their own and they need to feel safe there. But then outside of that, in terms of our programming, we work with different local groups to ensure that we are catering to different tastes, that we have a diverse programme of films. For example, we had a very successful dementia-friendly screenings programme. But that for me was really the pinnacle of that because it was free and it was a community service. It was far beyond a free cinema ticket or anything like that. It was a community service that we provided, offering opportunities to young people to get into the film industry and to learn about film and to make contacts. It's incredible when you hear how many people have a connection to it and yeah, how many famous faces, and that's helpful because they can advocate for you. And we've seen that over the years. We've seen the support from our patrons has been incredibly helpful in terms of spreading the word. I mean, a good example, I suppose, is that Mark Kermode always talks about the fact that he had his film education at the Phoenix Cinema. Now, I grew up in North London, but not close enough to know the Phoenix. But I knew the Phoenix existed and it had a place in my heart because I used to listen to Mark Kermode talking about it. And so I already felt as though I knew the place because I'd heard him and his recollections of it. And I remember as a teenager, I preferred going to a multiplex because it felt like a more anonymous space. Talking to young people, what I've learned is that once they know that the independent cinemas are often cheaper, and once they know that they're welcoming spaces, I've never met a young person who told me that they'd still rather go to the multiplex. That's a sort of barrier that I think that stands for a lot of people. And I think knowing that we're welcoming spaces, that we're often cheaper, and that we want to cater to different people in the community, I think those are the elements. It's not a sort of ivory tower that only certain people go to.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I think that's a nice thing to mention, is that it's not an exclusive club that only certain people are allowed into. You can buy the ticket, you can come in, and if you really fall in love with it the way a lot of other people have, you can become a member. Absolutely.
I mean, I think if you love film and you want to be someone who goes to cinema regularly, then going to independent cinemas is a really affordable way to do it, but it also will provide you with a sense of community. You will meet other people who share your artistic interests, who you can have great conversations with.
And by making the decision to buy a ticket at that independent cinema, you're supporting the cinema itself, as well as the people that you are interacting with when you come in, and potentially even the wider community that the cinema sits in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Phoenix is a really important resource for the local community. And also I think independent cinemas across London and across the country are really important resources in their local community. They really care and they're really embedded. And it's one of those things where people always have that bookshop they really like, but they don't end up buying anything from there. And it's the same thing. If you love that place, in order for it to survive, it needs people to come in, it needs people to support it by buying tickets, by buying a coffee, and by being regulars, by buying memberships. I think, we always say if everyone who said they love the Phoenix bought one ticket, we'd be absolutely fine.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's the future that you're looking at. So I'm not concerned, and I think that's something that we can all look forward to. Yelena, thank you so much for taking the time to show me around today. Do you think I might be able to take up a seat next to where Mark Kermode sits, and if he comes along?
Yeah, I mean, you might be waiting a while.
Okay, well, let's go and find Mark's seat.
Get yourself along to the Phoenix in East Finchley.
The last 10, 11 years, I was the leader of the Edinburgh Cinema Group, which is through a meetup. So we basically had a lot of strangers coming together from the internet, meeting up in the physical space of the cinema. And we had lots of events, over hundreds and hundreds of events over those years, going to cinema events, going to films, going to premieres, and a huge friendship circle developed from the backs of these meetups. There was only 3 of us. We went to see a French avant-garde film in the very smallest of the 3 cinemas inside the cinema. Now, I like French films, I like avant-garde films, but this one just was too much for me, even for me. And I was thinking, if it wasn't for these 2, I'd walk out of this now. In the cafe bar afterwards, we were all having a chat about, well, what do you think about the film tentatively? And And I don't know who let it out, but it turns out that we would have all walked out after the first 15 minutes of it, but we all sat through the film.
Would you name the film?
Film socialism. It was so pretentious, even for avant-garde films. The cinema cafe bar area, there was a lot of different peoples moving in and out of that. So, friendship circles in their own right, individuals. But then because we had this other internet-based congregator of meetup, there was all kinds of other meetup groups. So at one point there was about 4 or 5 other cinema groups in Edinburgh, all on the same platform. And when new members would come along on, say, a Saturday night for a film, they would be like, oh, are you the meetup group? And it'd be a case of, which one? And literally there was the horror group was sitting across the aisle with their band of people they'd recruited for that night, and we were going to see a different film. And at one point I think there was 3 or even 4 different meetup groups on the same night in there, either going to see a film or just having a meeting or just having a night out, and it was really, really sociable. and got to know quite a few of the other organisers because we just had members in common.